Hello and welcome. So in this video, we're going to talk about specifying color and how to implement color. Now, this may be a review to some here, but let's go over and walk through some of the different values we can actually specify for the various properties that would take color. And so you'll see that it could take the color name, the Rgb value, the hexadecimal color code, the HSL color code, color values. And so let's play around with this here. So I created a code pen. I just created a box, so I have div ID box, and then I have a style root that's going to give some presentation to this box. So we center this box by saying display block and margin auto, and then we gave it a width and a height, and we gave it a box shadow. So we can also give this. That's going to use the background color. It's a CSS property that can take the value, detect the various color values, and so we'll say background color. And let's first give it our first way of specifying color would be using a name. So we could say, in this case, let's say blue. If we do that, right, that changes the box to blue. We can also do an Rgb value. So if we say Rgb, right, and what we can do is we could place, technically you could place 4 different arguments within the Rgb function. And so this here is a function that could take 4 different values, or it can take 3. And so and this slide here just talks about a little bit about the different values. You can give it a value that ranges between 0 and 100%, or you can give it a value that ranges between 0, an integer that ranges between 0 and 255. And so here's an example of what that looks like. So if we just gave it this value here, let's go ahead and copy that and place it in. And so you can only imagine a number of permutations that you can come up with. So if we were to change this here to say 10, right, you'll see that that's going to change the look and feel of the color. And let's actually bring this down to 55. And so that brings it to this blue, or we can change this here to 25. That brings it to this green. So there's a number of different permutations that we have here. Now there's another function here called Rgba, which the A stands for alpha, which is really the opacity or the transparency of the color. So if you put like let's say 0.3 here, is really so it's how transparent, the translucent or the opacity of this background color. And so we gave it a 0.3, right? We can increase the transparency and say 0.8, and you'll see it's the same color but a little bit darker. And if we say 1, that'll be the true color of this green. And so if we were to take away 1 and then take away the A, you'll see that it's going to be the same color there. So that's the Rgb value. You can use hexadecimal color codes, and over here to the right, it shows you kind of an idea of what the makeup of a hexadecimal color code. And so you can use the red. So the hexadecimal color code is made up of 3 different types of color codes. And so there's red color code, there's the green, there's the blue. And so based on whatever values you give for the red, the green, and the blue is what's going to make up that particular color. So you could do values between 0 and also the alphabet. So here's some examples of that. So let's use this one, FFCC99. So if we go back, we can also give CSS properties that take color a hexadecimal. So FFCC99, and it's going to give you this color, right? We can also use numeric values. So 00, let's see what that gives you. So a number of, you could think there's millions of permutations here. Now the same thing with, you can also give this a 4th value, which would also has to deal with the opacity. And so we could say 44, and it's going to give you a different color or the opacity of it. So that's the hexadecimal color codes. And like I said, there's more to be said there, but nonetheless, those are the different ones you can specify. Or basically this is kind of just gives you the breakdown of the various color codes and how they're constructed. The last thing, let me say one more thing about the hexadecimal color codes. If you have a hexadecimal color code that's all the same, let's say 333, 333, 6 of the characters are the same, you can shorten it by just only giving 3, and that would suffice within CSS. All right, let's talk about HSL, which stands for hue, saturation, and light. And so here, if we copy this and we go back, we can also give this a HSL value. And in that video that you watched, it talked about HSL, the hue, saturation, and light. And so that is also permissible, where you can give it 3 different values. The values can range between 0 and 255, or it can be 0 to 100%. And so this is an example where the first value is 120, the second value is a percentage, and the third value is a percentage. So again, just a recap, there's 3 different values you can specify for color. This next one here is using linear and radial gradients. I need to change this, and so it's not radical gradients, but radial gradients. And let me just kind of do a quick demonstration of that. If you right click here on this button, it's going to take you to a page that says CSS. It's going to take you to the CSS W3C schools. But before I do that, this button here is actually reflecting a linear gradient from top to bottom. And so here's an example of it here where I'm highlighting. You use the property called background image, and you give it a function called linear gradient, and you can specify these 2 hexadecimals that would achieve the look and feel of what you see in this button. And you may be saying, Chris, why are you sharing, why are you talking about linear gradients? Really, I'm trying to give you a number of tools you can use when you're actually designing your own website. And this helps create the visual appeal of your site, or it helps enhance the visual appeal of your site when you do some of these different techniques or implement some of these different techniques on your website. So let's actually use this one here, and then we'll take a look at some of the other different gradients you can use. So here I have another code pen that's set up, and if you wanted to, you can also revisit these pages here. So I'll save them. And so if you go to these particular URLs, you can pause the video and go to these URLs. You can always play around with these different pins that I've created. And so here's one for the implementing linear and radial gradients. In this case here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a background color, or I have to use the background image. And so if you do want to implement a radial gradient, you have to say background image. In this case here, I already have it copied, so I might as well just paste it in for a quicker iteration. And you'll see that this is how it's going to apply to this button. A really cool effect, where it's this blending effect that's going in here, where you have this green and it's fading into this blue, and it really creates this nice visual appeal. Let's take a look at some of the other ones you can implement. There's radial gradients, where you can kind of create this circular. It's not linear in a sense where it goes from top to bottom, but more so it starts in the middle and it expands out, right? And this will be an example of how you would do that. So if we were to take this here and copy it and place it into our example, right? That's another effect. And then there's a lot of different ways you can specify the value that the arguments that you pass into this radial gradient function. And so you can say closest side, farthest side, farthest side, or farthest corner, I'm sorry. And that radial gradient will show up in a number of different ways. And then backing up here, here's the various linear gradients. Not just from top to bottom, but you can also go from left to right. And so if we were to take this here and copy this, and I think the key here is that you have to put the to right as the first argument within this linear gradient function. So if we go back, we paste that in, and we kind of achieve the same effect. You can also do directional or diagonal. So you go from like the left to the right corner to bottom right is the value I have to pass in as the first argument. And so basically there's a number of different things you can do to be very creative in terms of implementing gradients into your site. And like I said, they just create a level of visual appeal in your site. So play around with that. Some of you may decide to implement that into your final website. It's not something that's required, but you may find that to be something that may enhance your site, your interface. In the next video, we're going to talk about understanding different graphics. So the PNG to JPEG, and there's some newer graphics that we can use that makes loading our site and loading our graphics and images in a browser a little bit more efficient, or make them faster to load into the browser. So we'll talk about some of the different graphics, or some of the different file formats we can implement into our web page in the next video. Stay tuned.